Hello and welcome back to another episode of the War Report. And oh boy, it turns out all hell's broken loose. Yet again, I know I start out many episodes that way. Now, the Wuhan virus I will touch on briefly before getting into the main topics tonight. Seems like a lot of concern has fallen off the radar for it when people realized it's only affecting Asian males. Which, again, leads me to the suspicion of bioweapon, but I mean, there's that case, the guy in the UK. I know it's largely a joke, but I mean, there's a kernel of truth to it. Where he got it, and he said, "Oh yeah, I just had a couple drinks and some honey, and I'm all better now." There's been other cases like that, but again, the fatalities have been in China. Of course, there's been leaked numbers saying, well, the infection rate and the death rate is much higher than they've been telling us. But again, that goes back to what we touched on last week, and I'm starting to suspect, like, yes, it's a concern internationally having a disease spread around, which of course it can mutate those sort of things, but as of now, as of who it's infected and the symptoms and just that kind of stuff, it seems almost of zero concern to Western countries. Now, I still do support some of the travel restriction measures, whether that be by the airlines or in other countries, governments such as Italy, Israel, whatever. But ultimately, I have to say I'm much less concerned about it than I was a week ago, and definitely much less concerned than I was 2 weeks ago.
What a nihilist. Yeah, same here. So just to put into perspective, SARS, and I believe the other one was MERS,
Yes.
had a much, much higher infection rate. Now, I know this is airborne and can be spread through human touch. Um, so like MERS. But so far, the death toll has been slowing down. Like if you look at the last 48 hours, the numbers are not jumping like 100 each 24 hours. They're jumping around 26 to 30, 35, and so on every 24 hours. So it does seem to be slowing down. And I had no idea. Are you saying like only males have been affected?
I'm not saying only males have been affected. Now, granted,
But mostly.
yeah, mostly, but it's also China with massive gender imbalance from their policies of previous decades. So that data may be a
Right,
bit
right.
skewed, but from what I know, it actually is more infectious to males.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, so I mean, it's still, I would say, early to tell. However, yeah, it is slowing down. Tuberculosis, influenza are several magnitudes claim more lives than the coronavirus. A lot of this is just statecraft too. Like, it's not just clickbait for mainstream media, but it is a way for um, the average pearl to say have a need for the institutions of a society, whether it's the way flights are conducted, how medicine is distributed, how governments act to coordinate. That's, I mean, I think that's part of it too. Um, Especially in a time in the West where I think there is a lack of faith in Western institutions. So uh, I think that plays a role in it too. How much, I don't know, but the news is going to, tuberculosis and influenza are not, they're not sexy viruses, diseases, epidemics in the way that this latest one is. And of course, uh, that isn't to mention, the trade war that's been going on with China and the U.S. and how much that factors into it. I think that is kind of like the underpinning point of this narrative that we see on media. That is, how is this going to affect business? I mean, it already is. Uh, Levi Strauss, the jeans manufacturer, and Apple have closed. Um, this is their these are their biggest stores happen to be there. So not to mention manufacturing.
Yeah, there's been a shutdown of almost all commerce and business in one of the most active times of the year in China, Lunar New Year, which I believe is
That's right.
like 4 week long celebration, something like that. I know it's a extended celebration where people are traveling all across the country, all across that part of Asia, because Vietnam, some of these other Asian countries also adhere to the lunar calendar for cultural reasons. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up the economy thing because the economy is the biggest victim of this, and it is funny that, like you said, like yes, there's concern about it, but ultimately tuberculosis, influenza have so far been more infectious, kill more people every year. Now, again, granted, this is a new virus, but it is fun to watch the global economy get shaken up by this unexpected event. And just to
Mm.
bolster your tuberculosis point, and it sort of goes back to the travel ban thing because you look at what's spreading in India. They have new strains of tuberculosis and those kinds of diseases all the time. Same with Somalia. A lot of refugees, a lot of migrants from Somalia, a lot of quote unquote high skilled workers from India on their HB1 visas and various other travel programs. I would argue they're probably more of a risk at this point than the coronavirus. I'm not saying that we should not shut down travel with China temporarily until things get sorted out, but I'm saying we should do that, but we should more so be concerned about what's happening in those parts of the world. I mean, like I said, I hope this is a wake up call so these sort of things get pushed through. Now, I doubt it will be, but I'm hoping as it is so far, and that's what it looks like to me, even among some, like someone like Trump, who has been kind of limp wristed about these sort of issues, that
Mm.
it shows, yeah, maybe we need more travel restrictions, even for countries that aren't a terrorist or political threat. Maybe it should just be harder to travel in general. Maybe there should be more health screenings, more security screenings. But that's all I have to say for that topic. Much shorter than last week. But you ready to get into some real news?
Yes, yes.
Syria. Oh boy, it looks like
Mm.
I've said this many times before. I've said it a few times before. I'll clarify. But it looks like Idlib is on its last legs. There's been massive breakthroughs on Assad's forces side and his allies' side, to the point where even Turkey is getting concerned. Now, there was some skirmishes between Turkish and Syrian forces. There was a reported skirmish between Turkish and Russian forces, which I haven't heard of anything more of the Turkish Russian confrontation, even though I doubt it amounted to much or it was either swept under the rug because of the growing relationship between the two countries. But point being is the main focus here is Turkey, I would say, is putting on a last stand show for the world community, for their international reputation. They have no intention to go in and defend Idlib. They'll send the occasional arms and aid shipments to their militant groups there. They'll have these skirmishes and these drills on the border and in Syria. But if push comes to shove, they're not going to draw a line in the sand and defend Idlib from Assad's forces. This, again, looks mostly like a show of force that's not going to amount to anything. And on a similar note, Israel has, of course, picked up their strikes west of Damascus. I believe you said so. That
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're raging right now.
yeah, especially with the deal of the century not necessarily working out, and then a major victory for Assad all within the time span of 1 week. Yeah, the government in Israel is not very happy right now. Netanyahu's not very happy right now, and of course he's going to be facing another election soon. Again, we're getting to Southern Europe level of dysfunctional democracy, or I would say even at this point maybe Latin American levels of dysfunctional democracy. But I suppose since it's a parliamentary system, it's more fair comparison to Southern Europe. But it is quite the sight to see in Syria. There hasn't been much news about U.S. forces, which are still in the Lebanon numbers, occupying the certain oil fields, occupying the strategic regions, making sure ISIS doesn't resurge. That old narrative. Yeah, you got to watch out for ISIS's resurgence. But I mean, it's all the same on that front. There's been virtually no news of the Kurds or northern Syria, northeastern Syria. Again, a lot of the focus has been turned to Idlib. And yeah, like you were telling me before we started the show, and I tend to agree, this seems to be the final stand, and as our friends over at South Front put it, Assad is destroying the democracy in Idlib.
That's right. Uh, Last week we were talking about how important it was for Assad's forces to take Highway 5, and they've basically done it all the way up to Sarakib, which is slightly southeast of Idlib city, and creates a kind of a wishbone where the M5 highway meets the M4. That's one of the areas where the Turkish forces that roared into that area when defenses were collapsing is stationed, and it's basically surrounded on three fronts. In a way, Syria doesn't have to engage them. They could completely cut them off and use that as a bargaining chip. Uh, the fact is in the last 2.5 weeks, something like close to 500,000 refugees have already left. They're entering Turkey. That could be one of the reasons why Turkey is very concerned right now. I think the average, Turk is definitely using that as a reason why there has to be Turkish presence in Syria. Of course, that completely negates the fact that Erdogan, like Israel, like Saudi Arabia, like Qatar, like America, literally sided with terrorists in order to destabilize and regime change in Syria. But I guess Turkey doesn't like paying the price for it as a kind of junior partner to NATO, though it is a NATO partner. Yeah, so there's massive gains. I mean, if you look at how much of Idlib was controlled last week compared to this week, they've lost close to 25% of that territory. And I think even the attacks on Aleppo have been a kind of desperate measure. They did manage to kill some civilians today on the outskirts of Aleppo, but they're never going to take back Aleppo. I think this is a lost cause. There's been yet another confrontation between U.S. and Russian forces in northern Syria. And to that, I would also add that a program that had been covert for years, where America was developing drone technology and drone spyware and drone monitoring of PKK forces in Turkey and in Syria. That program has now closed. America is no longer going to work with Turkey on that because, of course, now I guess the Kurds have been betrayed. I don't know if it's one of those particular groups that is involved in this part of northern Syria, but that has to be a blow. I think that's a very strong. It's symbolic, but it's also a little more than symbolic of a kind of flaccid relationship that's developed between Turkey and America. That might soon change. You don't know. There's a lot of parties right now that I think are very upset. They can't accept that Idlib might fall, because strategically that was the thorn in Syria's side that was there to keep the country in a partial state of destabilization permanently. And basically, with Idlib falling, the only occupying force there is America. And I mean, you can bet that they're not going to leave. So they will have to look for another jihadist group in order to, fight Assad. Now, that might take a few years. It might take a few months. It's hard to say. I don't know. The only other option I see for the U.S. is it makes a deal. Why, its presence to steal oil from Syria and occupy the main highway artery connecting Syria to Iraq should be completely controlled by American presence. So that'll be interesting to watch. But that little green controlled area of that northwestern province or northwestern section of Syria is getting very, very small.
And more clustered with different news events, as you can see on the map. So, yeah, definitely a lot going on there. And like you said, America will stay indefinitely as long as they can, whether that be through mercenaries. They will find a way. But you did forget to mention one occupying force, which that little sliver on the border with Israel, in that little place called the Golan Heights. But we won't get into that. We won't get into that. But also, you said that could change between Russia and Turkey and the U.S. and Turkey and their sort of Turkey's changing allegiances. One story this week that may back something like that up is President Erdogan, this is from the Daily Sabah, which I believe is a Turkish newspaper. President Erdogan at joint news conference with Ukrainian counterpart Zelensky in Kiev, spelled Kiev, my editing on the article, and he said, I reiterate that Turkey rejects the illegal annexation of Crimea. Now, of course, you can expect this. He'll come out and say, again, Erdogan will ingratiate himself to whoever. He's the wild card of not only Middle Eastern politics, but global politics as a whole. Now, I don't know how sincere this is. He keeps on pushing it. I really want the Russians to come out and call out the debacle in northern Cyprus, but again, yeah, I understand there's more to it than getting off sort of like linguistic victories and things that look good in the newspapers. That there's more thought that goes into that. But if this continues, I strongly believe that the Russian government should hit back with that. But ultimately, I don't make much of this. But I do think it's a bit funny with the way Russian-Turkish relations are going. They've been going on an incline for so long, and then Erdogan comes out with a skirmish between Turkish and Russian troops, allegedly. Turkey putting its foot down more in Syria as sort of a last stand show of power sort of thing. And then ultimately getting the big one that's really going to ingratiate him to the West, Crimea.
Right. He's going full stop. Ultimately, I think what Erdogan really wants is some kind of a fix for the amount of refugees that Turkey's been taking care of for 9 years. The population has grown from 3 million to nearly 5 million. Now with another 500,000, it's going to go past 5-6 million people. So what's to be done about that? I mean, how many is America going to take in? How many is Saudi Arabia and Israel going to take in? How many is France going to take in? And Britain? They all supported it. So what are they doing? And America is not, it's not helping him out. They need to find a solution. And that, in a way, is why America won't help him. It's because he's left to his own devices to, try to curb what is happening there. I think Erdogan completely accepts that he's never going to oust Assad. I think he realized that at least 3 years ago. I think his situation is that he has to feed these people. I'm sure he gets, money, funds in order to achieve that. But this creates a tear on his country's social fabric. There are emerging problems, and another 500,000 more coming in with no place to put them. For instance, Greece is building like an aquatic fence in order to stop more refugees from coming in. Where are they supposed to go? What is supposed to be done? So I think this is what's adding to the complexity of the situation in Syria. I think this can't be underestimated because South Stream is on. It's functional. Um, the ties are still there. The possibility of remedying the situation in one way or another is still possible, but um, Turkey has to understand that there are no legitimate rebel groups in Syria. They don't exist. Tahrir al-Sham was formerly al-Nusra. This is an al-Qaeda affiliate group, so they will have to talk to the Americans about this.
Send a delegation to Washington and Tel Aviv
They
immediately.
need to send a delegation to Washington to have a real serious conversation about this. um, and this is how Russia sees it, and Syria, that these are terrorist groups, and they constantly provoke at the border. And it doesn't matter that they have families, and that people support them. Yes, of course they do. They support them. This entire camps in Syria, in the Kurdish area, that are filled with like ISIS brides with 4 or 5 of their children. By the way, just as an aside, Pompeo thanked Kazakhstan for repatriating something like 600 ISIS war brides and their children.
Oh yeah, we'll
So,
get into some of the Pompeo stuff actually here in a minute with regards to certain stories in Russia, Ukraine, whatever. But continue.
right. So I think this is like, I don't underestimate that as a real valid concern for Erdogan. He's like I say, he's not going to change the situation. The years where he was getting that stream of truck convoys filled with oil coming into Turkey, and then Turkey selling it. Those days are over. They've been over for years. That's never coming back. However, there is a humanitarian crisis that he has to deal with now. Interestingly, Western media has already started. I saw in the Canadian National Post an article about that butcher Assad and Putin bombing babies and white helmets. Oh my God! Yeah, yeah. But if it's a jihadi hospital, is it a hospital? Yeah. No. No, but so everybody knows this chorus. They've heard it before. Every time Idlib is losing ground or another city falls to Syria, we all know the chorus. We see videos of white helmets. Yes, there's probably going to be another fake chemical attack coming very soon. Um, what else? Well, Russia bad, new sanctions. Russia just received a new bunch of sanctions last week. And yeah, I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. And so the truth is, they have to be driven out. Something has to be done, and the West and America have to take responsibility for this. This is their baby. They did this. They deserve this. America really should take more of these people in. I'm sorry, but they should. Like, I know that they're listed as terrorist groups, and that's convenient. That's really great, especially when you don't want them in your country, and uh, especially for immigration and refugee purposes, and the legality that goes around those two subjects. But the fact is you do support them.
Well,
So
I'll elaborate. We should take them into New York and California.
yes. Or at least, I mean, I don't know. Can Saudi Arabia not do something? Can all these other countries? I mean, these fighters, they're also from Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. They're from Turkey. Many of them just live on the border and are like dreaming of a new Turkic super state, a nationalist, super nationalist Turkic state. From Yakutia to Constantinople, to Istanbul.
I mean,
Sorry.
I guess the spirit of Enver Pasha really lives to this day.
Yes, yes, it does. I think it does. the humiliation is over.
Uh,
Yeah, so that's all I have to say about Syria at the moment. I think Russia is feeling the pressure. I do. Like I think maybe a period of calm is okay, and to maintain the gains that have been taken. Uh, the smaller, like a lot of highways now are cut off, and they're not going to be able to gain the kind of freedom of movement, but also supplies as they once did. Although they are going to get that from the other side, which is the other side of the Turkish border. So
I can't believe these mysterious planes are dropping supply packages in Idlib. I wonder where they could. I wonder where they could be taking off from and who they could belong to. Yeah. We'll
yeah,
we'll, we'll leave you to speculate on that one in a few weeks. But uh, going back to Crimea, allegedly, good old Mike Pompeo said something that is probably the most sane and rational thing he's ever said. So, according to a Ukrainian news outlet that goes by NV, Pompeo apparently told activists in Kiev last Friday that Crimea is lost to Ukraine forever. He allegedly said world leaders understand that Russia won't give it up and nothing can be done about it. And I actually don't doubt he said this. Look, Pompeo, you'll find no fans of him here. And most things he advocates for are complete garbage. But I do think he is probably smarter than most neoconservatives. He probably has a better head on his shoulders than most of them, where he can make the concession that yes, Russia will control Crimea. Now we're going to keep up our foreign policy against Russia. This by no means Pompeo wants some sort of agreement or reconciliation with Russia. We're going to keep on doing what we're doing in Syria. We're going to keep on doing what we're doing in all these places in Europe and Belarus, which we'll get into. But I think he pragmatically realizes that after 2014, Crimea was a dead prospect. NATO's not getting their base in Crimea, and it's pretty much over, and that the U.S. is wasting time trying to promise Ukraine that, oh, Ukraine will be reunited once again. We'll defeat I mean, he didn't say anything about the separatists in the Donbass, but I imagine that was probably implied, if not outright said and just not reported. But I think at least some of the more pragmatic neoconservatives, as oxymoronic as that sounds, sort of realize Ukraine is a lost cause and are sort of, I wouldn't say willing to give up to Russia, but less willing to defend it as they would, for example, other European countries such as Poland, the Baltic states, of course, further in the Western Europe, the Balkans increasingly, and of course, our greatest allies, Israel and Saudi Arabia. But I do have to say, I wouldn't be surprised by this. And funny enough, we actually had a segment a few months back where we were talking about what will be the first Western country to recognize the annexation of Crimea. I discounted I discounted Hungary and Italy for the sake of fairness because they both have very close relationships with Russia, but traditionally antagonistic countries towards Russia in the past 20, 30 years. My prediction was France. No, I'm not saying the U.S. is going to come out tomorrow. Pompeo or Trump is going to come out tomorrow and say, yes, Crimea is Russian territory. We formally recognize the annexation, but I think there's been all across the world a recognition of the reality of the situation, and if this is true, they're just now starting to come to terms with it.
right. It is encouraging. I mean, nobody thought they would fight World War III over Crimea. That's the red line. Russia isn't going to give up its sovereignty because of some stupid neoliberal notions about statehood and rule of law, especially when
The rules-based world order.
yeah, when like the people who are apparently upholding that like are fighting illegal wars. So nobody's going to take that seriously. Everybody understands that this was uh, Russian land at one time, and it was literally given in midway, like just after Stalin's death, and it's not going to go back. You know, um, and the West isn't going to die for it. And if Ukraine wants it, Ukraine will have to die for it. But Ukraine can't. They can't fight for it. They wouldn't dare. and the West isn't going to risk itself in a war for it. So these Eastern European countries can ask for all the assistance and whatnot. The fact is America is not really invested in their patriotism and their let's say geopolitical ambitions in the same way that America is invested for itself.
Yeah, definitely. Or even countries again like Israel and Saudi Arabia, or even Poland at this point. But
Yeah.
I think that lays out a pretty solid explanation of the situation. But I am not surprised, and again, it's we've been saying it for since the beginning of the show. Yeah, Crimea is not going back. It's honestly, I mean, unless the Tatar uprising comes about, which maybe that's the next card the West is going to play. We'll see. These we'll see
Well,
Al Qaeda in Crimea fighting for Tatar nationalism.
well, to that actually, I read an article just today that Pompeo has walked back his initial statement and said that it was really directed at the fate of Crimean Tartars, like like as if Crimea isn't rarefied enough for a reason to have World War III, but Crimean Tartars are.
Yes,
It's so
that
preposterous.
that is the case, and not to get on too much of a tangent, but I remember that during the initial invasion, they were like, "It's going to be a genocide. We have to step in. We have to prevent the next." Of course, they say Yugoslavia, Rwanda, all these things they list off. We have to save the Tatars, in which nothing came of it. Literally,
Nothing came of it. The Tartars aren't going into internment camps. They're not being sent to China with the Uyghurs. Nothing's happened.
yeah. I mean, it's like they haven't even been like sent to any other parts of Russia. They haven't even been like internally relocated. It's but again, they'll use whatever wedge they can. They'll harangue on minority rights or whatever because again that's part of the rules-based world order, as we've been told many times by the usual suspects. Those people. I'm not even gonna get into it, but what we can get into is Belarus has been drawing quite a bit of attention to itself. Now, you recall just about a year ago, 6 months ago even, that union between Russia and Belarus appeared closer than ever since the idea was originally proposed in the 90s. And I genuinely thought that it was going to head towards that direction. But it turns out that uh, Lukashenko is making a bit of a fuss about oil and gas prices, pipelines, those sort of things. Nothing out of the ordinary. We've seen this a few times before. And of course, this leads to our other good friend Pompeo. Apparently, Pompeo is on his world tour, which I think episode title. I just came up with an episode title. I love when that happens. But he's on his world tour visiting Belarus, talking about, oh yes, we can get you that oil and gas, and oh, you can become dependent on us instead of those Russians. Look, we're selling Poland gas, we're selling all these other countries X, Y, and Z gas, but yeah, it looks like it's your time to join us, Belarus. Now let's negotiate. How many pride parades are you willing to have in Minsk?
Yeah, it's hilarious when Pompeo in Kazakhstan said that you're going to lose sovereignty if you do deals with China. Well, I mean, you're going to lose sovereignty, your cultural sovereignty, if you do deals with the West and with either Washington or Brussels. So yeah. Now I wonder if Lukashenko is doing this to set up a bargaining chip with Putin over yet cheaper gas. It is on Russia, I think, right now to supply Belarus with probably the cheapest prices it can afford to send them. This can escalate, of course, but the truth is, I don't think Belarus can afford to buy American energy. It certainly won't be as fast and as reliable. That said, I don't want to minimize anything because America is going to install an ambassador in Belarus, something it hasn't done in 10 years. So obviously, America does want a foot in the door with regards to Belarus. I think they see it as part of the encirclement strategy of Russia, um, and it remains to be seen how America will invest in Belarus. If it's anything like in Ukraine, then it won't go very well. Belarus itself culturally is closer to Russia than Ukraine is in many ways. Russian is a dominant language even more so than it is in Ukraine. And while there are nationalists and while there are Belarusians who do not want to be part of a union with Russia, they're generally not a huge bunch. They represent probably 20 to 30% of the population. It's sizable, but it's not by any means kind of, it doesn't present the potential for a Ukraine-like event that happened in 2013 and 14. So it remains to be seen. Lukashenko is supposed to meet with Putin soon. And I think we'll probably get a better idea what is happening and will likely develop in 2020 and beyond after this meeting with Putin.
You think we'll get another kielbasa situation?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the last time Lukashenko went to Moscow. This is so. I just love these headlines. It's so not our world. He showed up with like bags of potatoes and kielbasa. Well, I mean, I'm Slavic, so like, yeah, that's good food. And while Putin was playing hockey at Red Square, his team won. He scored 5 goals. Totally legit, right? He's really, really good. He's judo on ice, and yeah, could have been on the Olympic team if you really wanted to. Anyways, so yeah, we'll see how that goes. We'll see what Lukashenko brings with him or doesn't. So yeah,
Yeah. As you said, I don't see a color revolution or Maidan sort of situation because, again, it goes back to the population. 80% of it speaks Russian as a regular language. It's sort of the lingua franca, it's the business language. Lukashenko gives his public addresses in Russian. The only people who speak the Belarusian language are liberal hipsters in the capital city and older people who speak sort of a hybrid language between Russian and Belarusian. I mean, we're talking about people who were alive when the Soviet Union didn't exist. Okay, that may be a bit of an exaggeration, but the point stands. And
yeah,
really, I think the U.S. is in a much more delicate situation because I'm not saying that I would expect a unification between Belarus and Russia. I think Russia is in too much of an economically unstable situation to integrate any new territory beyond things that are the size of Crimea or absolutely that vital. I mean, look, maybe 5, 10 years down the road, we could be talking about a completely different story. But as for now, a large integration like that isn't possible. But I wouldn't put it past the Belarusian people if there's some sort of upset, if there's some sort of a Maidan, that they may stage something of a counter revolution that has the support of the majority of the population. I don't think they're going to. Not that I don't think Lukashenko's going to get overthrown or anything, but I don't think they're going to tolerate Western influence to the degree that countries like Poland or Ukraine do. I think they're going to stay much closer to their roots, which in this case are in Russia.
yeah, I would agree. It's too valuable, and frankly, it's all too close um, uh, to Russia. I mean, when you go to Russia, by the way, like when you land at the airport, they have like an aisle for all Belarusian and Russian citizens. So, and then for everybody else. So, just to give you an idea of
Yeah,
how
don't they have a bit of like a travel agreement, as it were, where it's sort of a
right.
porous border?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, yeah,
absolutely. And the Russian middle class owns a lot of property there, a lot of summer homes. Um, so it's there. And the Russian middle class also owns uh, quite a bit of property there, summer homes. So these two countries are more intertwined on a more fundamental level than Ukraine.
and let
You
me
know,
guess, it's also one of those cases where every fifth person in Moscow is a cousin in Belarus.
right? Yeah. So yeah, and I've met Belarusians in St. Petersburg, of course. So besides just the relations, um, Russians are more likely to own other homes in Belarus rather than Ukraine. Whereas, companies and whatnot, yes, there's Russian companies in both countries. That's what I meant on a fundamental level, like kind of on a sort of middle class or lower economic level, on a more granular social level.
Yes. Like I said, like you said as well, this is definitely not a Ukraine situation, and we also have to look at it from the other side of the coin, where the West has much less interest in uh, having a foothold in Belarus. Now, of course, if the opportunity presents itself, they will take it, but it's not something they're going to actively pursue like they did in Ukraine. Now, the Ukraine thing, as we mentioned, sort of fell apart after Crimea was seized by Russia. But even countries like Germany are investing in Ukraine because of the agricultural output. Now, you could say Germany maybe invest in Belarus for the same reason, but ultimately, again, with things with their deal secured with Ukraine, I don't see them going that far. And I think even the most anti-Russia figures and the people pushing anti-Russia policies realize that Belarus isn't really that necessary of a piece in this puzzle. It would be nice to have, but it's not vital in taking down Russia.
Right. Uh, I mean, Belarus doesn't have direct access to Kaliningrad, so it's an important piece. I mean, maybe the U.S. is treading carefully because if it does, um, you know, warm up to Belarus and Belarus vice versa, then Poland is not going to be like America's best friend anymore. They're just that one step further west. So I don't know. Be
I,
smarter to have nuclear missiles permanently, like in Minsk, pointed at Moscow than from Warsaw. You know.
yeah. Uh, so you think we're gonna get Fort Blumph in Belarus?
Not anytime soon. No.
Oh no, that's unfortunate. I guess we'll have to settle for Fort Blumph, Poland, because
Yeah.
yeah. But with that out of the way, as you were saying, Pompeo was on his world tour. He was in Kazakhstan, pretty much trying to get them to cut ties, well, cut trade ties at least, with a country that's directly on their border. That is again a vast land border. I suppose if the Uyghurs really rise up, that may be a problem. But as it stands now, I don't see that happening. And yeah, Pompeo has been quite the active boy lately. And moving on, the dispute between Russia and Poland involving Israel and Jewish groups and Holocaust remembrance continues. So,
Mm.
Putin, of course, went to the Holocaust remembrance thing in Israel, and the Poles are angry about this, and Israel is really playing both sides of it, no surprise. And it's funny because I saw an article from the Forward that was.
Yeah.
Let me pull up the exact headline on that and read the author's name because it's surreal, and it says right here that Putin's new propaganda campaign turns the Jews into a prop by Isabella Tabarovsky. So I'll leave you to speculate on that one, and you gotta love it. like the absurdity of it, of course, has become one of the highest values for the West, and by extension, Western adjacent countries like Russia. Where, look, I'm not saying Putin is completely free to influence. I know, of course, there's some people in our audience who may dispute that, which, yeah, I understand. But you almost have to admire how he's completely turned this on his head, because fundamentally that headline that the Forward put out is right. They are a prop in his campaign and not the other way around. And after, what, 70, 80 years of this, you have to laugh the fact that the man, I don't know how he does, he completely turns it on his head and turns World War II and the Holocaust and all these things into pro-Russian propaganda. Now, of course, that again goes back to the cultural differences, the portrayal and national opinion on World War II. Again, in the West, it's become, of course, it was the fight for liberalism, democracy, and anti-racism against white supremacists. Whereas in Russia, again, it's the Great Patriotic War. Now, I don't see with Russian culture, unless barring a radical change, that it may become that, because in the West before the 60s, 70s, it was viewed similar to how it was in Russia, a valiant fight for your nation rather than these abstract values. Now, again, like I said, that could change, but I am not counting on that anytime in the next century at least. But I, I mean, again, I repeat myself, but I I dare say I love the absurdity of all of this.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people forget. How long has Putin been in power? I think he came at the heels of 1999.
Yes.
It's 2020. How many times has he been to one of these things? Three. Three. That's it. That's not that many. That's 20 plus years. You can't say that about other Western countries, can you? And yeah, I mean, I've always thought that he literally just uses the whole plight and suffering of the Jews to, you know, bring the light also on what happened to Russia. That's an indemnable part of Russia. You
And
know,
do you
like
know do
I've
you know what they're
been to.
specifically mad at him for?
Mm.
He compared the siege of
Oh,
Leningrad to
yeah,
the
because
Holocaust.
what's that?
He compared the siege of Leningrad to the Holocaust.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, and rightly so, because um, you know, we know from Hitler's documents that he did not want his forces to storm in. He wanted to starve 3.5 million people and just bombard it and close it off and then go in. He literally said that he wanted everyone to die in there and to raise the city to the ground. That those are his words. And yeah, so it is like that for them. I mean, I've gone to two victory parades in Moscow, and there's nobody, like, there's not even a hint of like any kind of Jewish aspect to their patriotic war at all, none. It's absolutely non-existent. And if you go to Auschwitz, of course, every country has their own pavilion, and the Russians will want to remind you that before Auschwitz became a death camp for Jews and other ethnicities and other groups, it was a death camp to 3 million Soviet Russian soldiers. And they take, strong pride in that they liberated Auschwitz. Well, you know, why? Well, I mean, yeah, Jews are part of it. I mean, if Jews play a very powerful role in America and elsewhere, so yeah, they'll get mentioned. You know, no one denies the how strong this narrative is within the West. But make no mistake, it's also about them, and it is for Russians in Russia only about them. It's not like, you know, the Jewish question, and like that's not a big deal. Like in my friendships, and it's not even there.
Yeah, like you said, any Victory Day celebration is the massive military parades. It's not like what you see in the West. Now, granted, there were times in the West where
And people
it
holding up
once was that.
photos of their grandfather or great grandfather who died in the war. Literally millions of them.
Yes.
That's what it is. That's what it means to them. It will never mean what it means to the West ever.
You know, I think the closest comparison I can make is World War One. France lost something upwards of, I believe, 1 million people and had at least that border region occupied, and of course, brutal time. And maybe go back 50, 40, 50 years ago. That may have been an apt comparison, but I mean, you compare it to the United States, who was an ocean away, the British, who were an island and an empire away with colonies stretched all across the world, even the French, who were occupied. It was a rather swift occupation with a puppet government set up. It wasn't the level of slaughter and killing and fighting you saw in the Eastern Front, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a completely different narrative beyond what Stalin wanted or what the Soviet Union wanted. It's that half my village was wiped out during the occupation. My both of my grandfathers fought in the war. All of my great grandfathers fought in the war. Whatever. It's again, as you said, it's fundamentally something different at the point where they don't even call it World War II. They consider it their war specifically.
Right, right. I mean, what is it? 8 out of 10 Germans died on the Eastern Front. I mean, what is it on the Western?
I actually don't know off the top of my head, believe it or not, but uh, yeah. With that out of the way, I thought that spat continuing was mildly entertaining and very telling of sort of the cultural narratives within these countries. Now, moving on to a uh, similar topic, which involves Macron, yet another wild card on the world stage, and he had a summit with Polish officials, and he was talking about how we must embrace our shared common European values, and talking about how Europe can't just be a market, sort of arguing for the solidification of power of the European Union after the Brexit. So, nothing we haven't seen before. But what sticks out most is he said that France is anti Russia, and also as part of the shared European memory, we needed World War II. So, going back to that, he's really playing up on the Russians, saying, look, we were allies in World War II. We both fought Germany. We both defeated Germany. And sort of throwing Poland under the bus, which is an interesting strategy, considering the fact just a few weeks ago he was propping up, I suppose Hungary's a different case, but Hungary and Poland as sort of these more nationalistic forces in the EU, and playing them against the establishment of the EU in its own power bid. And fundamentally, I mean, I think we all see where this is going. Macron wants this. I don't even want to call it the United States of Europe, but he wants this European bloc with Russia included to counterbalance China and the United States. Now, I'd say probably at this point the United States more, especially with his relationship with China and him going over there and sort of greasing some palms over there. But uh, it's I don't think it's going to work, at least in the way he wants it to. But it's really
Mm.
I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to say it's a skillful sort of statesmanship. And again, this isn't even praising him personally. I'm not even necessarily saying I like Macron, but it is interesting to see a Western country outside the United States express this level of competence. Well, I wouldn't say competence, but power on the world stage. Now, not to say that. Let me clarify. The United States has become recently incompetent and has faltered recently. Now, of course, a lot of things we would attribute to incompetence could be attributed to, again, more sinister goals, such as the Iraq War. Most people think that, oh, Bush was the moron who invaded Iraq. There's definitely more to that, but again, that's aside the point. But going back, it's impressive to see a world leader in the West maneuver his country and his sphere in such a way.
Yeah, but I agree with you that I have my misgivings about what I think he is trying to accomplish. Only because not because as an idea, I disagree with it, or I don't understand why France would want that. But because it just seems untenable at the moment. You could look at what's developing and maybe predict in the next 25 years that this is like America is going to reconstitute its power and influence in Europe in a different way outside of the EU. It's going to bypass the EU altogether. Let's say France fails, what then? I mean, Germany is essentially like an occupied American country. Uh, from its papers, which their headlines have to be proofread first in Manhattan. Um, what are they going to do? They're not really going to instigate anything. So that leaves France. That's the only other great European power. There is no other great European power. I understand Macron wants to seize upon that and create a kind of future for Europe because as we discussed, Britain's ties with America will only strengthen, and they will become even more entwined. And I think everyone's known from day one that with Britain out of the common market, the single market, they're also going to become a competitor with other European nations. So I understand why he would want to reach out, and of course he was more or less very conciliatory with Poland, mentioning very quickly after arriving Poland's tragedy during World War II and the predicament that they were in between two great powers and so on. But the Poles are not going to have anything to do with it. Like the Poles literally want American bases with a permanent American military personnel indefinitely, forever. And they just signed on to acquire something like 23, 25 F-35s. They're spending a lot of money on American military tech. They've signed on for more nuclear missiles. Poland isn't going to budge on this. And 2021, Poland's contract with Russia for gas delivery is going to run out. So that's going to be interesting. Fall of this year will be an interesting time to see what develops between Russia and Poland. So yeah, I mean I understand, but like honestly, Poland can't. Poland is not has no vision of Europe that doesn't like I don't know, make Russia like a non-entity, right? It cannot accept Russia's strength and importance to Europe. I understand why, and I I get it, but that's not going to change anything. Um, so along with the Baltic states, it's going to remain in that position indefinitely. And this is why I say that this could be a way of America reconstituting its strength in Europe in a new way outside of the EU. For instance, Netherlands now has, I think, tipped the scales at 52% in a recent poll would like or are thinking about getting out of the EU. The EU could be looked at as a sinking ship at the moment. I still think it's too early to tell. However, I think America sees this as a golden opportunity, and Poland is absolutely Poland is literally America's greatest ally.
Yeah, I mean, at this
Not
point,
Israel.
yeah, at this point,
America is Israel's greatest ally, and Poland is America's greatest ally.
yeah, I would definitely agree with that, especially at this point with the way things are going. But I think you bring up a good point: the fact that Poland wants this indefinite state of we'll take the American protection, but we won't take any of the cultural, economic influence. We'll be a nationalist on those levels, and ultimately having no vision for the future. Whereas as flawed as you may consider some of these, whether that be China or France or Russia or the United States or even some other European countries, I would say even arguably the UK, Italy, now arguably Germany. Again, that may be pushing a little. These countries have visions for the future. They see a direction they want to take their country in. Turkey's another one. Whereas Poland and a lot of these other Eastern European statelets think we can be nationalistic, we can be under a foreign security umbrella, and it won't affect us, and we can stay this way until the end of time. And
Right.
that's going to be their undoing. And now, I've seen more reasonable proposals from them, like a V4 coalition, a Central European coalition. Now, I think that has pitfalls, and I think that probably wouldn't work, but at least that is a vision beyond protection by foreign power and doing nothing else about it.
Right. And the only outreach I saw was a few years ago. There was an idea thrown about creating a European designed tank. Uh, Europe has done this several times, along with Britain, um, for warplanes. But this time it was a tank. Last time, France rebuffed uh, Poland and said they didn't want to have any Poland involved. This time, Macron has asked them if they would like to join France and Germany, and I think there might be another country as well for this project. So that could be a way of building some kind of trust. Um, like I say, they 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 are more invested. They are is Poland is as invested in America being the superpower till eternity as much as Israel is, and they will never relinquish that. So in a way that blinds them from like who they really are, and like after all, like the only reason they're that important to the states is because Russia is more important to the states than Poland is, geopolitically speaking. So
It is this weird paradox where they
I mean
want
that's why
American
their
security,
politics
but American
are so
security only exists because of Russia, and Russia is the reason they want American security. It's this self-feeding cycle.
right, and that's why its politics are so reactionary. And I don't mean that in a dissident right sense. I mean their politics are reactionary, that in the sense that they don't lead, right? They're reactionary because they know that for the only reason big powers are interested in Poland is because Poland is sitting next to Russia, and Russia and America are in a proxy war and have been in a heightened sense for the last 5 6 years. So yeah, I mean that's why you have reactionary politics, is because like their value is based on those reactionary principles.
It almost reminds me. This is probably not a 100% accurate example, but you see this even to this day. A lot of the Irish will pride themselves on how different from the UK they are. Oh, we're so much better than the English. Even when you saw this in Brexit, oh, we're staying in the EU, we're going to stay part of the European community, unlike the English. And it it ultimately is they're letting their national identity and their identity as a people as a whole be overtaken by a blind hatred based on, admittedly, a very, very poor historical relationship. Now,
Mhm.
again, I can understand that. I can understand why, look, after centuries and, of course, after, stories being passed around by family, by your society, you would get that feeling. But they're not the only country that has a rocky history with another country. Far from. And several other countries have, even in recent years, have managed to patch things up. They've managed to create new alliances. I mean, look at the United States at the beginning of the 20th century, at the end of the 20th century. These European countries they were not on good terms with. Now, granted, that involved a lot of war and bloodshed, but the point stands that geopolitics, politics, nothing, in fact, is ever set in stone. Things are constantly changing. Things
Mhm.
are ever moving, and right now, Hungary sees it. A lot of these other European countries see it. They see the world shifting and they're playing into it. They're seeing what they can get out of it. But at risk of repeating myself yet again, Poland seems content just to let the world move around them and staying in one place. Now, I know a lot of this may sound like progressive rhetoric, but in a way, I would say I am a progressive. Now, what's been considered progress for the past 200 years is not what I consider progress, but point being is, yeah, I want to keep things moving forward. I want new ideas. I want to be at the forefront, trailblazing it. Now, again, that doesn't mean becoming a gay superstate, but I think you all get the point.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's ultimately the price that Poland has to pay for indefinite security. It can't provide it for itself. I mean, it simply cannot. It knows it can't, and it wants someone else to invest in protecting them indefinitely. Uh, so, I mean, you're not that isn't going. That's not a country that can have a vision of the future because from the onset, you're admitting that you're not capable of some very basic things, such as autonomy, the ambition to create, your own autonomy and a military to back it up. Like, I think that speaks for itself.
I do as well, and uh, I think we've made this point. I think we've made this point many times, many episodes, for several months now. The fact that, look, it may not be too late. We could see a massive change, but as it stands now, I don't see that. And I think any further discussion of the topic, unless you have anything else you wanted to get in, would just be saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I don't have anything else.
So, you want to get into some election news?
Yes. Yeah.
So, the Iowa caucus took place on Monday, and I think we have the results, but granted, that could change by the time this episode airs tomorrow. Now, what happened was they designed an app for voting, and it seems to either have not worked well or been deliberately sabotaged. Now, granted, this was designed by former Clinton campaign staffers, and the story goes, as the live updates were coming in, as counties and precincts were reporting election results, Bernie Sanders was in the lead the whole time with, I believe, it was Warren, Biden, and Buttigieg. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but then all of a sudden, Monday night, the results disappear, and you hear news of a recount and the fact that this app had a malfunction and isn't working properly. So that results in some him hawing around. That results in some really weird thing. I'm sure you've all seen the clip of the guy doing the coin flip where he waits like however long, like he's like shifting the coin around in his hand in order to pretty much read the results. And lo and behold, Buttigieg comes on top, I believe, with 28%, closely trailed by Bernie, then Warren, and then in fourth place, one Joe Biden. So there's that. And according to Bernie's internal polling, which he sent an email out to his campaign staffers, to pretty much anyone signed up to his emailing list, it had him at the 28%, then it had Buttigieg at the 25%, and then Biden Warren. So it seems like they just flipped those two, which seems a bit conspicuous to me. Now, I won't speculate too far, and I honestly don't know in this case, especially with the DNC, whether this is the fact that they are just sheerly incompetent, that they have no idea what they're doing, or that they're trying to get the man who looks like he was created in a CIA lab into power. I mean, the man is just uncanny to look at. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Buttigieg, that is, and I mean, I after the Clinton stuff, especially last election cycle, am going to say, yeah, there's some underhanded business afoot. Now there always is, but especially so. And I think Bernie Sanders probably won the Iowa caucus if we're going by the real numbers, which we'll probably never know. Now, of course, New Hampshire's coming up in about a week. Bernie's probably got that in the bag, and Again, that's just proximity to Vermont, similar political cultures. I think they can't even afford to try to rig that one or do anything of the sort. But yeah, Buttigieg came out on top, and it's funny because he had that one poll back in August, September, saying, "Well, he's leading in Iowa. He might win Iowa," and lo and behold, here we are. And it is also funny. I'm sure you all saw he gave the victory speech right before
Yeah,
they recanted the results, which again raises even more and more questions. And considering the fact, again, this guy is the candidate of the intelligence community, the candidate of the international financial sector, the military-industrial complex. It seems like even though they're not open
and
about it,
Silicon Valley.
yes, yes. They're sort of putting everything in him, waiting for the top three, being Biden, Warren, and Sanders, all to devour each other so he can rise on top. And that may be what we see. I'm not going to say he's going to be the nominee. It's still too early on to predict that. But I think he's going to be someone they try to wedge in there, whether as the nominee or as the running mate or some prominent position. It seems like he is, especially with how young he is, how relatively unknown he was up until recently, he is being groomed for this.
Very much so, and it's very suspicious. Also, this app with a very suspect name, Shadow Inc. It was started. Yeah, I kid you not, and it was started by three Hillary campaign veterans. Um, what was their excuse? We had trouble with coding. Coding what? Like, it's just adding numbers. This isn't like, it's not like some complex video game. Like, it's just literally adding one plus one, right? So I didn't buy that. I mean, I know, like, you could tell, like, for the boomer population, a lot of the boomer population wouldn't know what that meant. That would, those were special magic words. You wouldn't get this, boomer, coding. You don't know how software works and so on. So everything about this is extremely suspect, and it seems they've they've literally shafted Bernie again. Uh, I really don't buy the mainstream narrative right now. Does not seem likely. I could be wrong, but I don't think they reformed in 4 years. Uh, they they stole the nomination from him. They would do it again. Uh, so no, I mean, there's that famous video of the coin toss for electorates, and Buttigieg received three with this ridiculous coin toss where the guy like holds the coin, flips it on the side that he wants to win, and then that's it. So this is very, very fishy, and it's kind of hilarious how, like, everybody can get really, like, you have these various backers. So I'm very sure Google is probably behind Buttigieg. You have Silicon Valley behind him. You have, of course, the military, which is all about gay liberation and so on. And I guess they're just being pragmatic, but they'll at the same time have very misleading article headlines that make you believe that Putin somehow hacked the voting machines in November 2016. It's just it's so ludicrous. So yeah, I think this erosion of institutions, this erosion of trust in institutions, is just going to keep going. People are going to become very, very pragmatic. And it is already about power because the country is too divided. There is nothing that is going to unify people. Not for a while, maybe not ever. And when that happens, you have kind of like what Spengler outlined in his Decline of the West, that he himself predicted around, in the 21st century, there would be the rise of what he called democratic Caesarism. So there would be families who would become president. So sons, well, we saw that. with Bush. Um, and you could say that Trump, in some ways, is like a very much a poor man's Caesar, a kind of goofy, kind of American type, uh, not like Patton or someone. So yeah, uh, so there's a struggle. It's kind of like the facetious and insincere questions of the libs shortly after Trump got elected. You call yourself a Christian and you voted for Trump. It's like, of course they're going to vote for Trump. They've literally lost every cultural war. They already know you hate them and want them to disappear and cheer their deaths. Yes, they're going to vote for Trump. Yes, that's they're going to do what you do. So I think that dynamic, I think, is going. I mean, I think that's part and parcel of politics, anyways. But we're talking about magnitudes. We're talking about how strong and how prevalent that is. And I'm just saying that that's going to become more prevalent.
I think you're missing the real takeaway from all of this. That
Oh yeah, okay.
Putin has been defeated. They rebuked him by making sure Buttigieg legitimately won because we all know
Yeah,
that Putin was backing Bernie.
yeah. I mean, nothing is going to infuriate Vlad more than Buttigieg getting elected. You know, like what's worse, a woman geopolitically spanking your ass or a gay man? You
Oh,
know,
I can just imagine them saying, "Oh, we need someone tough."
yeah,
Buttigieg, he can stand up to Putin. Yeah, Putin's a
yeah.
homophobe. He's gonna be afraid of him. Like, just these ridiculous
I think
narratives.
not. I think I would bet that, like, in a way, Hillary didn't get elected. She didn't become the first woman president. And even if there is a woman president, it won't feel like a big deal because a first American female president, even in 2016, was old. It literally should have happened in the 90s or maybe even late 80s. Of course, it wasn't going to, but like it already bypassed. Like you could see how Buttigieg geopolitically, he could be useful. Like every time he travels to Moscow, he travels with his husband, to rub it in Putin's face, and his, like, of course, more gay flags everywhere. And it would be there to infuriate, to basically give Vlad an ulcer. That would be the whole point of it. I can imagine some strategists thinking along those lines, but I agree with you. Kidding aside, I think Buttigieg is being groomed. I don't think Buttigieg is not going to disappear from American politics, and I don't suspect he's going to win 2024. However, I think he's going to become more prominent after 2024.
I think he is almost certainly the vice presidential nominee, no matter who else they pick. Now, whether he's with Biden or Sanders or Warren, I think he's got it in the bag to the point where they're going to tack him on to anyone else. Uh, can you imagine how insufferable a Warren Buttigieg ticket would be? The woman and
Yeah.
the gay man.
Oh, that would be so. Yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, like if that's not a snapshot of America, I don't know what is.
Uh, Maybe if Kamala were still in, they could say, the woman of color in the gay man. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Um, you know what? All this talk about Buttigieg being vice president has made me recall Hillary's potential running mate and vice president. I forget what his name was, but he was just such a, like, it's amazing. I forget his name, but Buttigieg has even less
Tim Kaine.
presence. Yes, Kane. Kane literally like Kane is just as big a simp and just as effete of a man, but he has somehow like more traces of some kind of soul. Like Buttigieg is, he seems so hollow to me.
He was made in a
He seems,
CIA lab. That's There's no other explanation. The man was created in a test tube. grown in a vat. And he never had childhood. He never existed. He just popped out of vat in 2014, became the mayor of South Bend. Nobody knew who this guy was before this.
Yeah, that's right.
You know,
That's right.
you know, like I almost hope like he gets caught in like a rainstorm or like somebody spills water on him so it can seem like he starts short circuiting. Like, see what's really under there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a gay robot. I'm still gay.
Just closed out one last thing. I've heard some conspiracy theories because I've never seen his husband. Like, is the gay thing just an act? Is he just saying he's
Yeah.
gay for publicity? Is that part of his like CIA cover? Like,
Yeah, I know. It's hard to tell. To me, he comes across more as a henpecked man whose wife is having an affair with another man rather than a gay man. But I mean, that's close, right?
well, no,
So
he's actually a gay man whose husband is having an affair with a woman.
ouch.
You know, in terms of entertainment, I thought Biden would probably be one of the most entertaining
Yeah.
nominees, but I'm starting to think that yeah, Buttigieg would be a pretty entertaining contender with just how inauthentic he is.
Yeah, very inauthentic. Like there's a fakeness. It is incredible. I think
It's like he's
the
fake
American.
by politician standards. Now we know all these
Yeah,
people are liars, they're deceitful, but like I listen to most politicians, though it's either okay, they're just lackluster and uninspiring, but they don't feel this. Again, I don't feel like I'm looking at a person. I feel like I'm looking at an AI generated image when I look
yeah,
at him and when I listen to him. It seems like a one of those like bots who fed political statements just just gain sentience.
yeah. There's no presence. I mean, even Cory Booker seems more human than him. And I think part of it is because they're constantly selling themselves. They're constantly repeating the lines that they've been told that they ought to repeat. Um, basically to indicate where the elite power in America want the country, what direction they want the country to go to, and so everything about it seems very inauthentic, no presence, no authenticity, and it's amazing how did this guy even get votes? Like how fake are people?
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. Now that Iowa segment and pretty much lambasting Buttigieg again, they give him the again. Even the last name sounds inauthentic with all the different pronunciations, and all the
Mhm.
different jokes, and the fact that he's a gay man with butt in his name. The fact that most people pronounce it booty judge for a gay man. Again, it just seems
Yeah.
it seems so contrived. But uh, yeah, Trump was acquitted by the Senate. Of course, Romney had his little grandstanding moment, but there was the State of the Union. Nothing really standing out in there. But I think that's a wrap for the week, unless you got anything else.
Yeah, I really did enjoy Pelosi ripping up Blump's address. That whole thing was beautiful. I really loved that. Like, I couldn't pick a side that I liked more at that moment.
I mean, it was just like an ultimate like spectacle because yeah, you have Trump giving this lackluster speech that really, again, it was the we're cutting back on immigration, allegedly. The economy's doing so great, and here's the things we all care about, like child health care and the troops, like the really middle of the road, inoffensive things you can't go wrong with. Of
Yeah.
course, the time the Democrats applaud most is for a brown guy trying to do a regime change. That was
Oh
something.
yeah, Guaido.
Yeah, he also has that same sort of made in a CIA lab feel as Buttigieg does. But
He looked like a cyborg. Did you see the way he waved to the audience? He literally was a cyborg at that moment.
oh, I don't doubt it. But yeah, ultimately it was very middle of the road, inoffensive. And of course, Pelosi needed to get her jab in there, like I'm gonna tear it up, and then That was funny in and of itself, and then just the backlash to it, how dumb she ended up looking on camera was even funnier. And then I'm seeing like things that apparently she had a pre-ripped speech in front of her, like there's like alleged camera angles. It's just uh,
Yeah, what a
like it
show.
it shouldn't be this entertaining. The State of the Union should not be
Yeah,
this entertaining. At least not for these reasons.
yeah. I mean, for me, it was a moment of acceleration. And it was really great.
Yeah, I mean it's like a more clownish like decline of the Soviet Union sort of situation.
Yeah,
But it's not like degenerate. Okay, maybe I should take that back. But we don't have a bad enough economy for it to be Weimar
yeah.
Germany. So yeah, we're like a more
Imagine, imagine the decline of the Soviet Union, but with lots of money
yes,
and really tacky Hollywood like production and
yeah, like I said, at least the Soviet Union made somewhat inspiring propaganda, but we have Hollywood. Uh,
yeah,
so yeah, it's like Trump is like this mix between Gorbachev and Yeltsin, and it's I don't know how else to describe it beyond the fact that we looked like a a, a sick nation, not necessarily like depraved, but like a nation that was ill, but in denial
yeah.
about it. Like again, it looks back like when I watch like the clips of like the '80s Soviet Union, like the newsreel and the like conferences and the meetings they had. It it's an uncanny like feeling of similarity to me.
That's an interesting point. Yesterday, I ended up watching. I do this maybe every 6 or 7 months, or maybe more. Time goes by than 6 or 7 months, but I'll look at the 2016 election results and all the people crying. I do love it. I'll look for my. Did I leave a comment here?
That's since been
But
deleted.
yeah. Exactly. However, I did run across videos where everybody, Pelosi included, where that said he's just not going to become president. Okay, he's not, and I can see how, like, from their point of view, like, this oaf cannot become president of the United States. Like, even if every single policy reflected what they wanted, like, um, there's a certain, he's so unorthodox and unconventional. I think he really has rattled them. Like, he didn't drain the swamp, but he's thrown some big stones in there, right?
Yeah,
He's disturbed them just by being there.
yeah. He's sort of like that guy who like beats a stick against like a trash can lid. I mean, he's not gonna beat you up, but like he's gonna make a lot of noise. He's gonna like really put ever like he's gonna like make a jump, give you a heart attack. Like what was that? Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, ultimately he's not gonna do anything with it. But I would say just the chaos factor has made it worth it. And
Yeah.
oh wow, this section was the longest ones we've done. Yeah, a couple
Wow.
months. Yeah, we're almost to an hour and a half, and I think I'll cut it just short from there. So thank you everyone for tuning into this episode
Thank
of the
you.
War Report, and goodbye.